continuing our conversation about the economics of board building, or more specifically, the dwindling profits of attempting to manufacture near a coastline and manufacture domestically, I want to introduce you to Chris Ruddy. Chris Ruddy has been the product of, but also the beneficiary of, Southern California's pioneering legacy of board building, but he's also been right in the middle of decades of gentrification in the form of corporations coming in and taking over commercial spaces, regulators creating a maze of compliance that can only be navigated by corporate legal teams, and ultimately, he was defeated. And he quit building surfboards as a result. But in that defeat, he was able to take some time away from the coast, find clarity, and he was able to see an opportunity that was sitting right in everyone's periphery since the 60s. But we were all unable to see because we were just focused on the ocean. Today's episode was made possible with support from Rourke, Real Water Sports, and Veyer Watches. You can save 15% on Rourke.com with our promo code Splendor15. Of course, RealWatersports.com has a 1,500 surfboard inventory. They will get you totally dialed with an off-the-rack board that is tailored to fit your needs. And then, of course, Veyer Watches. Veyer builds ocean-ready watches. They are assembled in the United States. Functional timekeeping, timeless beauty, VeyerWatches.com. All three of these partners not only empower our podcast, but also all other platforms of our work. YouTube, Instagram, at Surf Splendor. So supporting them supports us. Thank you, Rourke. Thank you, Real Water Sports. Thank you, Veyer Watches. And without further ado, I hope that you enjoy my conversation with the great and ever-evolving Chris Ruddy of Chris Ruddy Surfboards. Enjoy.
Surf Splendor.
Yeah, exactly. Well, to officially get started, my icebreaker question for you.
Okay.
Are you the first board builder in Utah?
You know, there's a guy, you've heard of Album, Matt,
Yeah.
and he's told people that he makes some of his boards up in Salt Lake City. So that's affiliated with Surfboards. I don't know if he's making his soft tops up there or what. I know that there's a if you could remind me one of the EPS companies, one of the green one that has that kind of the recycled symbol on it.
Yeah, Marco.
Marco, I heard is actually manufactured in Utah.
Gotcha.
There was a guy, you know, what's happened is because wake surf is kind of like wake surf is sort of like a group of orphans that don't know really where the parents are from. And so they, you know, I always tell people, hey, wake surfers are a bunch of orphans. Your real parents are, you know, are surfers. But because the wake surfing's pedigree has water skiing in the 70s, wakeboarding in the late 80s, maybe the 90s, it caught on from water skiing. You know, there was the trick water skiing that really never caught on with the mainstream. And then you got the wake surfing that it sprouted up maybe about 25 years ago. People started doing it on wakeboard boats because they could actually tune the waves. And next thing you know, I think what happened is because the wake surfing industry had gone overseas so early with the same construction that water skis are made with and wakeboards are made with and kiteboards and snowboards. They're all this high pressure, heavy duty laminate construction. I think they just went overseas about the same time the US snowboarding industry went overseas. So I can imagine the phone call from big companies like Connolly, hey, go make us some wake surfboards. The kids are loving this new sport. And they're over there going, okay, let's make some boards. And they kind of look like this. And so they didn't go to a surf approach to it where surfers have their blanks and their shapes and, you know, send it to the laminator. So I think a lot of the small guys that just wanted to start making boards in their garage took a Chinese made board and reverse engineered it. They opened it up. Oh, it's made out of EPS foam and epoxy. And I don't know why anybody did that, but it happened. Even Rusty, when Clint started making wake surfing, he wanted to make it into the wake surfing world. Clint Preisendorfer was started, I think, was one of the first real pioneers to come into wake surfing, from a surf background. But I don't know why they went APS, because my first thing was, hey, I want to make these boards. And at the time I started making these, nobody had won a world championship on APS and epoxy. And I'm like, well, why bother? They're tiny, they're 4 foot long. Why do you have to make them out of the most lightweight material? So I did a few experiments, I sold a bunch, and I got a lot of good response with Millennium US blanks, just regular old EPS, or sorry, poly blanks, polyester resin, 6 ounce sanded finish, and never broke one, never seen one buckle ever. And so we're going and making it. Last year we developed a skimboard. I didn't think I could make them. I was like, oh, I don't know, have all that stuff to make the exile. They vacuum bag they vacuum bag the or they vacuum suck the rocker into them on a table.
Oh
That
yeah.
Divinyl foam, right? It's a PVC foam, and I went and talked to this guy up in San Clemente who was making skimboards, and I'm like, ah, man, that's a big operation. So I just avoided it for the first year, and finally I just grabbed a blank from one of my Millennium or US blanks, stuck it on the CNC, and I cut it, and then I glassed it, double glass bottom, double glass deck, and gave it to our pro here, and his guy was just tearing it up on the thing. So I'm like, all right, I can make skimboards now. Not any different materials. I don't tell everybody in the wake surf world what I'm using. As you know, we got our own foam, and we have closed cell foam. So a lot of the problems that the boat surfers have out on the lake in the summer when it's 110 degrees is, even in the shade, the boards delaminate if they're EPS, if they don't have vents, or if they don't have the one-way vent that a lot of guys are using now. Not that I don't have any experience with EPS and epoxy, but I do. I've made my windsurfers out of that stuff. I've made lots of custom surfboards. I had the contract to glass Mitch's uh, SUPs for Dave Craig's shapes, and I was the guy doing all the airbrushing and laminating those and getting them to Mitch. So I just have a love affair with poly and regular. I like the production time.
Yeah.
I like I, being here in Utah was a dream. I've been thinking about it for 8, 9 years. And I quit. If you remember the days when I had ukulele surfboards, these were the Clark foam days. And I started that in about I started making ukuleles in 89. If you want to go back in time, but I came up when I actually got a business license for the brand in 92. And there I was, shaping boards, and all that stuff is just, that's my background. I
Well,
was working at, where
let
did
me actually take it all the way back. Where'd you grow up?
my dad I'm a military brat. So
Oh,
my dad was in the Navy, and I was born in some crazy place up in upstate New York called Ballston Spa. And there was till this day, I think there's a nuclear training place for submariners and people that work on nuclear ships and nuclear submarines. If you're going to go in and work on these, ships, you have to have, I think they have to have certain people qualified. So my dad was, we were living in this place in upstate New York. So I'm kind of like born in there, but every 2 years we moved. Sometimes we'd live somewhere for 8 months. And so I ended up with the first 9 years of my life, I was living on the East Coast, South Carolina, Virginia, Connecticut, all your classic submarine bases. And then all of a sudden, my dad says to the family, I was 9 years old, my brother was 10 or 11. He says, hey, we're going to get transfers. Where do you guys want to go? Want to go back to South Carolina, or do you want to go to Hawaii? And we were just like, we had seen ABC Wild World of Sports with Bruce Jenner and, Fred Hemmings. And we were just like, oh, surfing's the coolest thing. And I'd only seen skateboards from a couple of kids down the street. And I was like, skateboard surfing, we'll take it. Hawaii, my dad's, well, listen, they don't treat white kids too nicely over there. And I thought about it. I said, Dad, I don't care if they had white slaves. I want to live there. I'll deal with it. And so he took the position in Pearl Harbor. And in fifth grade, I'm the only Howley kid in St. Joseph School in Waipahu. A couple of weeks, we went to the public school in the Iroquois Point Navy housing right there in Eva. And all of a sudden, an opening came into this Catholic school. So my mom had a job teaching at another Catholic school, but they had no openings. So me and my brother are on the bus to Waipahu every morning. Smell the sugar cane factory. Just the smells of Hawaii in those days is just like, I can't forget it.
Mm.
Get off the bus, go in there, having a, good time. No one was too rough at I was the only white kid, but I was smart enough to know if I made friends with the kid who was a foot taller than me, Famufele, the Samoan kid, then I'm not going to get beat up on Kill Holiday. And I didn't know what Kill Holiday was. I knew it was the last day of school, but I didn't know why it was the last day of school until later as an adult. I'm like, oh, that's right. No one can get in trouble for beating you up because there's no school the next day. So that was more like you just got a slap on the back and people, hey, Kill Holiday. And they kind of joked about it at my school. But I had Famufele, who I took out, a kid from Waipahu, who probably never even been to the beach. And I said, hey, you want to go sailing? And my parents had a sunfish in the yacht club across the street in Navy housing. And I took this kid home. We went sailing for an hour, got all wet, put him back on the bus with a dime, sent him back to Waipahu. And next thing you know, that guy's my bodyguard at school in the schoolyard. So it was cool. Growing up in Hawaii was the best thing. I didn't know anything else, It was surfing every day after school. My dad's commanding officer, he had a bunch of boys that were older than me and my brother. So they donated me a 6'2" swallowtail, pink. I think it was during the PT era when everybody wanted pink boards. I ended up with this swallowtail and I'm trying to fix the tail dings with model glue just to seal it up. And that's my first experience with fixing a board, 10 years old. So that's where my wife and my kids make fun of me all the time. You're not from Hawaii, I'm like, hey, I lived a third of my life there.
Yeah.
A third of your life, what a joke. But at 15, when I left, I had spent a third of my life there. And that's the place that, like, no more tackle football, no more riding motorcycles, surfing, sailing, snorkeling, skateboarding. That's it. That's all I did. No more sports with lines and whistles. It was all just that.
So did your dad get stationed elsewhere and that's why you left?
He joined when he was 17 in high school. And so he was able to get credit for his senior year as a recruit, even though he was in school. And so at 37, once we had lived there for 5 years, him and his buddies, we ended up moving to Kaneohe on the windward side. And that was bigger waves. I got to go surfing on the marine base over there, Kaneohe Marine Base. Buzzy Kerbox and those guys put a lot of time in over there. But the waves were bigger over there and cleaner, a little bit of a closer taste to like North Shore.
Mm.
It was, the big swells would wrap. So if it was big, giant on the North Shore, we get like 6 foot over in Kaneohe. So my dad was just finishing up his Navy career at 20 years mark, and they get a pension after that. So at one point he was considering buying that. You ever seen that 50 First Dates movie with Adam Sandler? And they go and the kids are jumping off that pier and fooling around, and all the sailing was right there. And my dad was actually considering buying that marina with the fuel dock. And at the last minute, he caught a job from the defense contractor Raytheon, or they were known as Hughes Aircraft back then. And they hired him. So he retired, and my brother and I were like, at first he was talking about moving to Chesapeake Bay. And we're like, we're like engulfed in the surf skateboard culture. We're like, no, we're staying behind. We're going to get giant paper outs and live in the shack in Haleiwa. And then their parents were like, they realized we were serious,
Yeah.
you know, and they were like, okay, well, we'll go to Southern California. How does that sound? Okay, Southern California. So at the time, I was going to St. Louis High School, and it was a Catholic high school over there in Kaimuki above Diamond Head. And that school is like an hour and a half each way on the bus every day. And I was just
Wow.
driving me crazy. All boys school. It was a wild school. Okay. It just had a crazy underground vibe going on. They had it was just nuts. I mean, I don't think you want to know all the details about how crazy it was. But anyway, that was when I got a chance to go, and my dad retired, it was just Southern California. So we moved into a place in Torrance.
Okay.
Mom and dad and my brother and me, and the sailboats were kind of gone because we didn't really have any more access to sailboats. In Kaneohe, I lived in a marina, and I happened to be the 3 years I was in Kaneohe, Joey Cabell was in my neighborhood. And I was his newspaper boy, and my little girlfriend over there was his babysitter. And so Joey was always around doing crazy stuff, windsurfing. He'd pay me and my brother to $4 to scrub the bottom of his catamaran, Hokulea. He had the original Hokulea. He named it Hokulea before the one that Eddie Aikau jumped off of and swam away
I didn't
from.
know that.
Yeah. So Joey built this with Mickey Munoz and all his friends in the 60s. He custom made this giant thing look like a 42-foot Hobie cat, right?
Yeah.
Had a big pod in the middle where they would steer the boat, and incredible boat. And so I was just like mesmerized by that thing, and I saw it under full sail coming in. They'd always win the Lahaina Alawai race. And one time I saw them coming in at 30 knots of wind, and I saw 12-foot rooster tails coming off the rudders, and had full spinnaker up, the big balloon sail, right? That thing was up, and this thing was doing 25 knots easy, downwind with the spinnaker. And I just saw insane power. And I just thought, whoa, that boat is crazy. So I knew all the stories from Joey telling me, we surfed Tahiti. I sailed the boat down in 9 days from Oahu. I was like, 9 days to Tahiti? The thing must have been flying.
Yeah.
But that was those little stories that he would tell me. He was kind of a role model because I was a little bit of a juvenile delinquent. My parents didn't know it, but I hung around some bad kids at St. Louis. The kids that would take me skating at Wallows and that surfed Black Point, they were rough kids. And they lived up in Hawaii Kai, up on those ridges that you see going up the mountain there. And I think that was one of the reasons why my dad and mom wanted to get us out of Hawaii, because we started going like we were, you follow your friends. Yeah, I'm in my 50s, and I look back and I try to find these guys, and they're not on the internet except for police reports and stuff.
Ah,
So that's that I think my parents were kind of like, let's get out of here. We might be able to get these boys on the right track if we get
what
out
did
of here.
what did they want you to do with your life, career wise?
No input. No input. I was a senior in high school, and there's a pretty funny story, but I didn't even plan on going to college. And so my dad's having a cocktail party at our house, and some of his friends from Hawaii, from the old Makani Kai Marina in Kaneohe, his Navy pilot buddy, who was an airline pilot at the time, he's having a talk with this 17-year-old, and he's like, "Hey, what school are you going to?" And I look at him, I'm like, "I don't know if I'm going to school." He's talking about college, and
Yeah.
I looked at him, and I picked up on one of those guys that picks up on cues. He looks at me, looks to see if his wife is looking, and he looks back at me and says, "What about the chicks?" And I'm like, "Oh, wait a minute. the way he said it, I knew there must be great looking chicks at college. That's all it took. My dad's friend saying, "What about the chicks?" And I was like, "I'm putting my application in tomorrow." So I go and I apply for all the state schools. My brother was an academic and he was like calculus. He was in classes that I didn't even know what it meant, but I was one of those Bart Simpson C students, right? And fortunately, my junior year, I decided to give grades a try. So I tried hard in school and I got some pretty good grades. And I was like, wow, it's not too hard. I put in an application at San Diego State, Long Beach State, a couple other Cal State Dominguez Hills. And for I don't know why, I guess because I was alive, I had a pulse. My SAT score was horrible. But the day I went to take my second SAT, because my first one was so bad, my acceptance letter arrived from San Diego State. And I was like, yes, I don't have to join the Navy. Oh, great. So I went to San Diego because I knew from my high school days, I had a Hawaiian buddy that his mom got separated and divorced, was living in University City. And we had visited him a lot. Had a lot of weekends down in San Diego, surfing blacks and surfing scripts and surfing Winnansea during my high school days. And I had this 1970 Chevy van that was like, you know, it had the shag carpet everywhere and the table in the back. And when we went down there, all the boys in UC would jump into my van and we'd spend the night in the neighborhood over by Blacks. And you can imagine what we were doing. But um, that was how I started falling in love with San Diego. Got
Yeah.
my you know, here I am at San Diego State. I'm a terrible student. I don't know how to study. I don't know how to take notes. And I started doing really bad. And fortunately, and I just wanted to learn, you know, surf. And so I had my surfing. And then the second year of school, I got fired. I was working in a gas station in Coronado Island, and I was living over there. Um, and I ended up having this party for my 19th birthday, and we were it was a crazy story, but we had the guest of honor was the lady that was our landlord. She was renting rooms to us in Coronado, and so she had this boyfriend, this guy they called him Dooley, and I verified it that he was one of Mickey Munoz and Joey Cavell's buddies. He hung out with that same old first generation surfer crazies. So Dooley, his name was Tom, kind of matches the song, right? I remember he would come over and he had these posters from the 1966 World Surf Championships at OB. And I was an amateur barber. So I said, hey, instead of giving me $5 for cutting your hair, how about I want to give me one of those posters? So he gave me one. And I was like, yeah, this guy's got all the cool stories. So he had a slideshow, and for my birthday, we're going to decorate the garage. We were renting the garage to keep our boards out there. And the lady wouldn't let us have the party in the house for my birthday party. So we had it in the garage, and somehow or another, my buddy picked up a keg down at the thing, and we're just riding around on our bikes and inviting people to come. This guy was the guest of honor. We had palm trees in there and lights and a screen set up so that he could do a personally narrated show. And he had crazy pictures of him and Joey Cavell and all these guys. They'd go down to Tahiti and they'd find out like there would be a parade, and they'd say, hey, can we participate in the parade? And they would be like leading the band marching down the street. So I got a taste of these 60s guys also from high school. I had a buddy whose dad was Dewey Weber's sidekick, and his name was Skipper Fats. He shows up in some of these old surf movies, right? But Skipper Fats was the first guy that handed me a Milwaukee and said, here, I'll show you how to put a fin on or take a fin off of a board. And when he was he was kind of an amateur shaper, and he shaped our boards in Torrance in his little back garage thing. It was all head racks and surfboards. And he shaped me a double wing Swallow 510 laser zap type of board. And it was supposed to be a 5 fin, right? With quads removable 3 fins in the back. And it was, this is like 1982 or 83 when he's making this. And he got it glassed at Dewey's factory. And I said, hey, listen, don't let him sand it. Bring it to me. I want to sand my own board. So at about
Mm.
15 or 16, I got to sand my own board. And because I'd had a few opportunities with Skipper to, his actual name was Sam Harwood, but he was like, here, yeah, sand your board. I had one spot that was a little thin that I had to patch. But when I was living in Coronado and I got fired, so fast forward into the future, right? This lady kicked me out for having the party. It was, even though she crashed the party lady, the landlady.
Yeah.
Her boyfriend was our guest of honor. She crashed the party. And then when she woke up in the morning, she looked out of her balcony and she saw me like spread eagle on the grass in her backyard. And that was it. She just said, no more to this guy. He's out of here. And so I got to, I had to figure out a place to live. And so I slept in my friend's house. My roommate had a brother who was a psycho SEAL team guy. And he was the original, he was the second place finisher in the very first Ironman over in Maui. And he was over doing a triathlon, and he said, yeah, you can stay in my place. And so I'm staying over a few blocks away from where I used to live with all my stuff in my Honda Civic. My boards are on top. And I ended up, with it needing a new place to live and a new job. So I went out and I got in touch with one of my University City buddies who had a job at Joe Roper's. And I called him. I said, hey, this guy's name is Monkey Mike. And I said, hey, Monkey Mike, can you get me a job at Roper's? And he said, yeah, bring a board that has a ding in it, because Roper wouldn't let you audition on his stuff. And I was like, okay. And so I walked in to Roper's. He, called him on the phone the old school way. And I found an apartment in Sunset Cliffs. Had a little sign out. You just rode around and looked for rent signs. And I called it, and fortunately I saved a lot of money. So I was able to get this apartment. And then I went down. Next thing you know, I got to get a job. And there was this, like, after 1 year of college, I'm going into Joe Roper's. He put the board down and he's like, all right, prep the ding. And I grabbed the Milwaukee and ground the ding open. And as soon as he saw me handling the machine, he knew I had done it before. And he's like, all right, put your friend's board away. Work on those over there. Boom. And then like a month or two later, I realized I had replaced about 3 guys. He had these slackers that used to come in there and hang around and find out where the parties were. And they're gone. I'm like, what happened to those guys? And another guy who had just worked for him, I heard about this guy, Chris, that was working for him before. And turns out years later, I discovered that's Chris Darby from GNS. And we were working at the PB Surf Shop right there in PB Drive, where Debbie Gordon and Larry Gordon had the PB Surf Shop. It was the GNS shop of the mid 80s, right? And so Joe would, normally he had that free shack that they let him use on the side of the building to do his ding repair business. And it drew people in. So it was good for GNS, good for Joe. And Joe would close up and go to Hawaii every winter for his pilgrimage to surf pipe and get in the magazines. And then the 1 year, it was just me and this Japanese guy that we called Quasi. Hey, Quasi, like Quasimodo, right? But his real name was Tetsu, and he was one of these Japanese guys, probably a son of a stockbroker or something over there. And he just overrode his tourist visa. And, he knew the day he left, he was never coming back. So me and Quasi, we would hang out and, cook food together, love cooking. And, oh, you come my place and we party in Mission Beach. And so we got to know each other, and we asked Joe if we could keep the shop going while he was gone. That was like the first time it had happened. And Joe made arrangements and had his dad pick up the money. And he said, come by and and his dad would pick up the money and we would run the business. We'd open, 3 or 4 days a week, and it worked. And so I I was on my way learning about surfboards. And of course, if you worked at Joe's shop, you had access to Hank Warner and Skip Fry and anybody else that he knew. You could get boards. So I switched from my South Bay shapers down to the San Diego shapers. And I was like, I didn't care if he was even paying me. I was making $4 an hour when he hired me. But I remember just being so hard on myself, like, oh man, 4 hours have gone by. I haven't got anything done. And he would be like, it's okay. You're slow, but it's okay. So that went on for years. And, I worked for Joe for a total of like 6 years.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like a recipe for disaster, to be honest. If you're some kid who's been kicked out, he's leaving the keys of the kingdom to you, it could easily go awry. I'm curious, did you have like a particularly strong work ethic, or was it that you
Yes.
just, okay,
Yes. I had newspaper routes in Hawaii. I was the guy, the neighborhood, there was about 82 units in my yacht club community there in Kaneohe. And I was the guy that if they wanted their, the place was starting after 3 or 4 years, it started to look a little ratty. And they'd say, well, here's a bucket of paint. If you want, this kid will paint your balcony for $50. And it was all those little pieces of 1x1 slats, and you had to get every angle of them. $50, that was a lot of money for 11, 12-year-old kid. And I had a little Hobie cat, so I was independent. I could have my friends come over for the weekend, and we wouldn't ask, hey, can you take us to the mall? We would get on my Hobie cat, sail over to Kaneohe Marine Base, tie the boat to a tree, walk across the helicopter runway and surf Pyramid Rock and 14th Hole and the other Officers Beach over there. And we had all these little spots, but my parents, had they known what I was doing most of the time, they would have freaked out.
right, yeah,
We
totally.
we were out. And so I had a very independent spirit. And it's part of my personality just to be like pretty bold. And when you don't have to appoint me to be the manager, I'll just start managing people. So that job at Roper's was fantastic. And a lot
And
of
I'm
great things came from that position at Roper's.
and
Uh,
clearly Joe identified all of that stuff in you, otherwise he wouldn't have done it. Um, I'm curious if you could help illuminate one thing that I think a lot of listeners would appreciate is you mentioned your proximity to Skip Fry. Nowadays, everybody venerates Skip Fry as being the guy. What role did he play? How did he become the guy? Can you kind of illuminate
yeah, yeah,
how he became who he is?
I can tell you, I had a really clear understanding of what was going on with Skip. Skip was rebounding out of a kind of a dark era, like in the 70s. And I wasn't around in PB or nothing in the 70s. I was in Hawaii. But when I got to working for Joe, we're down at PV Drive. Next thing you know, he's like, "Hey, work at my dad's house over in the middle of a community in PV." His dad had an apartment building, and Joe lived there first on his own, and then he got married. And I was thrilled. Here's this guy getting married, and he had a baby, his first daughter, Samantha. And so I'm in the back of this alley with the garage door open, makeshifting the business while Joe was in Miramar building a new repair facility in the back end of Diamond Glassing. So he's paying Bob Boshi about $300 a month to use this unused space in the back of Diamond. And there it was, right next to my glassing area and my sanding room in Miramar. Once I started working up there, I had all these racks, trash cans, I took Joe's normal, when he taught me how to do the process of repairing, he was doing 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 boards at the most in a set. And I saw what he was doing. I'm like, I could do 30 in a set. And I was that kind of guy. I was like, I was taking my classes at state, going to my classes. I failed a class once in a while, but there was no way I wasn't going to go to work. And I'd do this big triangle from the Cliffs to Miramar. No, sorry, to the Cliffs to San Diego State to Miramar and then home again. There's a big triangle, and I did it for years. And that was it. That was my existence. So Skip was there every day with Leroy and Donna. She didn't drive, so if she wanted to go anywhere, she had to like just kind of cruise around with Skip. And there was the dog, Leroy, right? And Skip was sitting there, and he just had these patterns. He would drink his O'Douls, and he sat around, and everybody else was like, it's beer 30. 3:30 was like beer 30, and 12-pack would show up every day. And so I had access to the first guy that I had was John Hawley, and he was right next to me. And this is during the windsurfing era, so they get a big contract from Jimmy Lewis or Bob Dill. These are big windsurf guys. Next thing you know, Hawley's sitting in there, out of retirement, breaking out and rough shaping 10 windsurfers in a row. And the foam dust was up to his knees. So he'd go into the office with Bob and, with Hank Warner and those guys, and they'd sit there and drink a beer. And I'm like, after a year or two, I'm like, I want to learn how to shape. So what I did, as soon as he would leave the room, I'd run in there with a plastic bag and sweep up all the foam dust, bag it up, 2 bags, out the door, and throw in the dumpster. And then I just go back to my stuff. He'd come back. I wasn't like, hey man, I've swept. No, just kept to myself. I'm going to get in with this guy. Next thing you know, it was like 1988. I wanted to shape my first board. And I had a friend of mine whose dad was really nice to me, took me in. My parents moved away from our home in high school, my senior year. Imagine, it's April or March in your senior year and your parents move.
Yeah.
And you're like, hey, what about grad night? What about, all the festivities of graduation? Nope. Find a place to live. So I moved in with a friend. That friend's dad, I was like, I got to show this guy a surfboard. And he was a knee boarder. And I didn't know anything about knee boards. So I was like, they ride fishes, I guess. So I'll make them a fish. And I ended up making him a 5'10" fish. And John sat there and said, all right, kid, here's the template. Here's the pencil. Here's the saw. And I had watched him because of the trash thing, the habit of picking up his foam dust and sweeping without being asked. He let me stand in the room and just watch him. And so one of my things was I watched hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of cycles of him going through these routines. And when he picked up one tool, I knew what the next tool he was going to pick up because I watched it so many times. So when the first time he let me use his templates and his planer, and he would just go, I'm going to go to the office. You do this. And he came back, and I felt pretty good because he came back and started swearing. Oh, man. And he just started cussing at me, right? And I'm like, what did I do? He's all, most people have to wait a long time to learn how to do what you're doing. You're doing it on your first board. And I'm like, yes, John's approving of my shape. So shaped the board. And then I had the Claremont kids. There was a kid who was, was friends with some girlfriend's brother. And he turned out to be like my sales rep down in Claremont. Next thing you know, they're like, yeah, you can get a board for $2.25 from Chris Ruddy. He's shaping this ukulele brand, and we were screen printing our own labels on medical paper. Friend of mine taught me how to screen print. I had getting back to Skip, the Roberto's was close by. So I remember I turned 21. Skip was, he had taken me out for my 21st birthday, and he's like, you're 21, you've been drinking beer at the shop for 2 years now. I'm like, yeah, I know, whatever. So The shaper, John Hawley, was like probably my most influential, but then Skip shaped in a different way. He would skin the blank and then he'd draw the line.
Okay.
And then he'd cut it out. And he had a way of cutting. And I like the way Skip cut because he's cut up and down. John Hawley would put the blade diagonal and cut like this. And every time I tried to do it his way, the blade would start going the wrong way. And then Hank had his way. And so what I watched all three guys over and over and over, and I pretty much gravitated to John's because it was just a serious production style. And he used instead of using the planer to cut the rails, he used the Paul Bordieri like Paul Bordieri, Larry Mobble, all these guys learned from this one guy. And I never met Paul Bordieri, but I knew him. He was like the teacher of all the teachers. And everybody used his technique. So John used that technique with a big, soft, squishy pad with maybe 60 or 40 grit on it to just kind of manually plow the rail down and put bands in the rails. And the next guy, years later, when I had my own shop, I was across the street from Eaton. And Eaton was using the same technique. And I remember Eaton had worked around and shaped with a Porter cable and all this stuff. So I like John Hawley's technique of shaping with the sander on the rails. Hank used a planer, Skip used a planer on the rails. But what I saw was John was whipping them out. And when you looked at these 9.4, 9.6 windsurfers, and he had them all stacked in a row, there wasn't anything. It was like they were just popping off of the CNC machine. And he was doing one every 45 minutes. And so I, at the same attitude I had towards Joe, I didn't really care what he was paying me because he let me manage. One time, Joe went to Hawaii for 3 weeks and then followed that right back to back with a trip to Tahiti for 2 weeks. He was gone for 5 weeks and I was in school and I was running the shop, and I said, Joe, just go on vacation, go and enjoy whatever your surf trips. I got this. And by that time, Joe was buying a house over in Bay Park, and I was like, man, if I can get my boss to be this successful, this is what I'm going to do when I go off on my own someday. So I was just using his shop to run it at a good pace. I used to yell and hassle the kid that was down at the beach making estimates. He was an old friend from high school, and we called him Shpev. Hey, Shpev. I was a bad guy, and I used to call him up and swear at him and tell him he was horrible and an idiot. I had just a lot of bad habits that eventually I gave up. But while he was having some problems with his alcohol or whatever, substance abuse, and just not doing the job, I said, Joe, fire him. And this guy walks up in the back door at Diamond, and he's this Brazilian guy. He can't speak a lick of English. He's got a notebook pad and a pen and a pencil, and he's writing, I need job. And he shows it to me. And I had been dealing with this estimate polisher kid down at the beach, Shpev. And sorry, Shpev, me and Shpev are on good terms now, so we're buddies again. So I said, Joe, fire Shpev, hire this new guy. And it happened to be Marcio Zovi.
No way.
Marcio Zovi. And I took this guy. I just like to manage. I sometimes step on people's toes, stepped on Tom Curtis's toes, the airbrusher, a lot of times, because he'd be out there spraying, hey, check out the new tie-dye thing I just developed. Next week, it would be on one of my boards. And they're like, dude, you better watch it. You're stepping on people's toes. So I stepped on people's toes. But in this case, I took this guy and I said, you're gonna be working for me for $5 an hour. I'm gonna get Joe to hire you. And I said, and by the way, this is 1989. I needed to save money. and I had no roommate. I'm living down at the cliffs. My rent was about $400 a month, and I needed to start saving because I was going to go on a church mission, right? And I'm like, dude, you got to stop living with those brazos out in El Cajon. You got to live with me. I'll teach you to speak English. You're never going to learn to speak English if you don't have an English speaking roommate. And I got him to do it. I got him to work for me. He moved into my little bungalow down at Pescadero Street in Sunset Cliffs. And next thing you know, I'm listening to samba music at night, and he's cooking white rice and black beans every night, and fishing for halibut out front. It was just like, here are these two guys that just, we want to be shapers someday. And we used to take Chad Chester's guns and line them up at night when we go up there to shape. We'd shape in John Hawley's room. I had that privilege because I earned it. And we took the Chester guns and put them back behind us, and we take pictures of us shaping with like this, And
Were they shaped by Rusty?
they were Rusties.
Yeah.
Diamond was glassing a lot of the Rusties back then, probably all of them. I think
Yep.
when Diamond was formed, basically, it was the G&S production manager who said, me and my brother are going to start a new shop. Rusty was leaving Canyon at the time. He left Canyon, he created Rusty, Aki, the rest is history.
Yep.
But there's me and Marcio looking at that going, oh man. Marcio had shaped 300 boards. I'd only shaped about 80 or 90 in 1989, early 90. And so there we were working. I said to Marcio, I said, hey, I'll give you $1,000. You can buy a cheap car. He would ride this little girl's bike with the flower basket, from the swap meet, $10 bike. He'd be riding that from Sunset Cliffs to Mission Beach at the Ropers PV Drive every day. In the wintertime, it's cold, I said, dude, don't do that to yourself. It's raining, it's cold. Let me lend you some money. No, Chris, I do it the hard way. And sure enough, this guy saved up money, bought himself a Toyota Celica. And I was like, wow, look, the American dream. Look at this guy. And then next thing you know, somebody stole his car.
Oh no.
But he got it back. He got it back.
Okay.
Marcio has good luck, and he is the classic. You have to get my Marcio stories on another. There's 1,000 of them, but
Yeah.
Marcio is the tortoise in the hare, and I'm the hare, and he's the tortoise. He wins the race. He's done more. I lobby the guys at the San Diego Surfing Heritage Hall of Fame thing. I said, well, look, you guys don't even claim this guy. This is the best, most accomplished shaper. No one's had a world champ. Rusty's had world champions ride his boards. Now, that's a given. PT rode Rusty's. Sean Thompson rode Rusty's. Maybe CJ, I don't know. Did CJ ride a Rusty under contract?
I don't know if he won the title when he was riding him or not, but
okay. Well, my point is that Marcio has a contracted. Look at me switching topics on you. Marcio has a contracted rider, Philippe Toledo, who wins the world title, and I told those guys, I said, hey, you better claim him before Orange County or Huntington Beach or California claims him, because Marcio is. I was there from the. I told you, I need job. That was where I met Marcio. $300 in his pocket, a duffel bag, and 2 surfboards. And I was just like impressed. We worked it. We were roommates for a year, and then I went off and I did a church mission. I graduated college, and I was gone, sold my surfboards, and I'm in Argentina for 2 years.
Wow.
Just, that's just another chapter in the story. But John Hawley, Skip Fry. Skip was just so easygoing and mellow. He would be like, yeah, he'd tell you a story. If you're going to Hawaii, he'd stop and go surf this spot called Threes. I've surfed 4s. I never surfed 3s. yeah, it's out past the Sheraton. Just keep paddling out there. So I love Skip because he was very personable and very nice. And Donna was really nice. And they were, I was just this 21, 22-year-old guy. And I was like, there were Joe's wedding. I was there. Joe's fishing after, going halibut fishing or fishing off in his boat. He loved fishing. I got to go to those little parties and stuff. Hank Warner is and I've heard, Hank's been on the Scotty Bass did the podcast with him. I don't know. If you can sit around with Hank, he could be a stand-up comic. He is that funny. If his car was broken, he's like, Chris, give me a ride home. I'd be crying all the way back to PV because his jokes were so funny. He wasn't joking. He would just start talking like Rodney Dangerfield.
Yeah.
Yeah, I considered being gay a few times. You all the sex you want, anytime you want. And I just start going, what? Look over at him. And he pick his boogers, and he's just funny. It's so funny. And I just,
Yeah.
man, how can this guy be so witty? But he's still witty. If
Yeah.
you get to know him enough. But
I incidentally spent an hour with him last week. And I'm going to have him on the podcast. We just got to schedule it.
yeah, it'll be very entertaining for sure. For
Well,
sure.
well, you said that before you moved to Utah, you had considered doing it for a decade. Can you talk me through what led to that
Yes.
decision?
Yes. So I referred to my 2 years as a missionary, right? A couple
Yes.
times. 3 years into college, I had some friends that came back from church missions, the LDS missionary guys, and I used these guys in high school as my detox crew. When I felt I was going off in the wrong direction, I got to go hang out with these goody kids for a couple of weeks and kind of get back to where I can get some good grades. And I knew I wasn't going to disappoint my parents if I'm hanging out with these guys, going to dances and stuff. So 3 years into college, I had my friends basically, they gave me like a kind of a challenge to. I decided I was going to quit drinking for a month and just see what it felt like to live like them. And it was a crazy story. But once I had done that, then the spiritual ability to read scriptures and understand religion in general, it jumped off the page, and I was like, okay, I'm going to do it. And I'd never looked back. That was 1988, and I never went back. So I wanted to serve a mission because the missionaries that taught me, one of them was from Tonga and one of them was from Idaho. And here's this odd couple of skinny white guy and this big, tall Tongan guy. And it's a spiritual experience where I just knew I had to do it. I just knew it was right. And so when they were teaching me, I decided I'm going to go do what they're doing. And that was it. That's what got me out of college. That's why I got a good grades finally. My shaping. At 21, I quit drinking. When you're supposed to start drinking, I quit. And I went through a personal creative renaissance where I started playing musical instruments. I started shaping. I didn't want to just get a shape from somebody. I wanted to shape and learn how to do it. And I quit swearing at people. I started being nice to Shpev. And my personality got better. And I realized I could see my flaws a little bit clearer. And so that, where was I going?
We were
Oh, man.
leading towards Utah.
Oh, so as a missionary in the missionary training center in this crazy place called Provo, I remember it was a July I was out there, and I just remember like I'm sitting there with these 11 other missionaries, and it's 11 hours a day of studying, and just you're with these guys that are like 6'3" complaining that they're not tall enough to play basketball, And I can't say I wanted to live in Utah, but I felt something special about the people that I was with. It was like camaraderie. There was a when we'd sing and we would learn, we get these cool speakers would come speak to us every week, and they get you really lifted up before they send you out, 7,000 miles away from home to go do this missionary work. I was like, yeah, it's great. Too bad I got to make a living at Surfboards,
Yeah.
can't live out there. So in 2005, about 6 months before the Clark foam collapse of the Black Monday, as they call it, I've been in Oceanside in a factory that's about 3,000 square feet, running up to 60 boards a week. I had the big contracts with Dive and Surf and Jacks and Surf Ride. I did the Surf Ride stock, Surf Ride boards, the house boards. I did my Chris Ruddy ukulele boards. I did Sean Madison, had 2 or 3 brands that I was doing for him that he was selling in Surf Ride. And I was like, I had about 8 or 9 guys working for me. And I started feeling this fatigue. The surf industry is getting harder and harder. The costs were creeping up. The prices were coming down. And I'd heard, somebody said, they're going to make these surf tech boards. And I'm like, no way, no one's going to ride those. They're made overseas, who cares? But this guy, Pedro, who made, it's Javier's brother-in-law, no, Javier's cousin, Javier from XTR Foam.
Yeah.
His cousin started that whole thing with this SVF foam. It was basically the same thing. He told me, Chris, someday they're going to have epoxy boards from overseas and it's going to come over here. And I was like, I don't know. What kind of surfer is going to ride a board? Like we California surfers wouldn't even touch a board from Florida. We looked at that and go, get away, You couldn't sell a quiet flight in California. It was hard enough to get a guy from the South Bay to ride a Newport Beach shape.
Right.
Or to get a guy from surfing was very regional. You didn't ride a GNS if you weren't from San Diego. You rode. Anyway, you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was the thing was I got completely burned out on surfboards because it was just started changing on me. And, here was a guy in his 20s making 6 figures manufacturing surfboards, 3rd or 4th year into the business. And I'm buying new vehicles and paying them off 2 years ahead of time, buying a house, raising kids, married, having a life. And all of a sudden it just started. I watched the 8-year-old and a 9-year-old that I had. I think my oldest son was 9 at the time, 2005. And I'm not even having dinner at home. I'm out delivering to Huntington Beach in LA and coming home at 10 o'clock at night. And I'm like, man, I got to get my act together. Went on a little trip to St. George where I had a sister-in-law who just married somebody. Her second marriage, she married a guy out here. And I went out and we hiked Zion National Park at midnight under the moon. And it was so bright you could have worn sunglasses. And the air was 65. And I was just like, I was blown away that something exists it rivaled the ocean. And I'm an ocean guy, right? And I just felt, you know what? I'm done. I'm gonna reinvent myself.
Wow.
And my wife and I talked about it, and we started selling everything. We sold our house, we sold our business. I had a commercial property on the 76 that I owned that was worth some money. And I sold it to the the Bernards that own Surf Ride. Okay, you want to buy this lot? And they said, sure. And just sold it to them. They wrote me a check for it. And so I got out of town and just sold Ukulele Factory to one of my managers. Just say, hey, you want to take this over? Let's go talk to my accountant. I didn't know what to charge. So I sold it, handed him the keys to the van, and I was divorcing myself from surfboards. I was like, the surfers, the workers that worked for me, now we've all made friends again since those years. But at that point, I think we were at each other's throats. They thought I was the biggest jerk in the world. And I thought they were just all like, ungrateful, lazy guys. And I was like, oh, I'm done with this. So I moved to Utah in St. George in 2005. And then 6 months after I completed the sale of the business and moved out, and, poor Jonathan calls me, hey, guess what? Surf industry is officially over. And I was like, oh man, I felt so bad here. I sold him a lemon.
Yeah, yeah.
But it was Clark foam. All of a sudden he had no way to get blanks, and he didn't. It was just like craziness. So um I just kind of figured I tried to do real estate stuff. I took a mortgage license thing, and I was building homes, and I was doing okay in the beginning, but 2008 wiped me out.
Oh yeah.
So I found myself back in California in 2010, and I got I got a call from my brother-in-law who needed help managing properties. They manage about 500 doors in San Diego. So I took my wife and kids back to San Diego. We're living in Poway. And I started getting those little calls. Hey, why don't you shape a board? Marcio said, hey, use my room over here. Shape a board. Shaped a long board for somebody. And then 2012, I came up with the brand, Ruddy Surfboards. And I was talking to some surfers at Tourmaline, and they're like, we'll take a board from you. Did a few boards on Craigslist, sold them. And I realized that all of a sudden I could sell boards, and I could kind of bring my old brand back. I didn't want to step on ukulele's toes. I just said, oh, I kind of come up with a new brand, Ruddy Surfboards. It's not ukulele, because I had apparently told the ukulele guy I wouldn't compete with him, with that brand. I wouldn't bring the brand back. He's got it. So that was my thing. And now here I'm back in San Diego, and then I'm like, why did I quit making surfboards? I'm thinking maybe you can make them in Utah because of wake surfing, right?
Yeah.
There's wake surfing. And so about 2017, 2018, I made some inflatable paddleboards. I was trying to figure out a way to supplement. It's very difficult, as you expressed with your one of your last interviews with Alex. How does a surfboard guy make it? How does he stay in? Now you're competing. This is what I felt down at the sports arena. Marcio eventually built his beautiful factory down by the sports arena. He owns the building. It's 5,000 square feet. Hey, Chris, there's a place over here. You get it. We share it. I'm getting a CNC machine in. All right. So I basically rented a little shop. And I knew that if worst comes to worst, I could always fix things for Marcio.
Hmm.
During those years, in 2012, I was fixing Hobie cats and crashed jet skis on my day off, just to make extra money. And then surfing started sucking me back in. And there I was with my own little shop. And I got Jay Novak, the renowned San Diego guy who I worked with several times. And I got him to take a room and share some of the rent. So my rent was subsidized to almost nothing. And I had this shaping room. And then my next door neighbor to my factory in Point Loma, this is starting in 2013, he was a welder. He welded the driveway next to my shop. He welded a cover over it so I could put a sanding room there and a laminating area that had 3 stands. And next thing you know, here I am making surfboards. And I went, my goal was that first year of 2013 to make it to the 2014 boat show. Sorry, not boat show, a surf expo in Orlando.
Yeah.
With 9 boards. So I moonlighted that year. I didn't have a full-time job surfboard shaping. I moonlighted at from 6 to midnight. I would come in and work on boards. 9 to 5, I go show properties all day.
Wow.
Take pictures of walls and damage and introduce people to a potential rent, $600, $700, $800 a month. $1,200 was getting you a nice condo back in 2013, 2012. So there was there was my little family living in Poway, and I was driving down to the cliffs, and I was trying to make inflatable paddle boards to do something different. And I went to the boat show in, sorry, I went to the Fort Lauderdale boat show to try to schlep these inflatable paddle boards. And I'm like, I need a little bit of extra pizzazz in my booth. I'll bring wake surfboards. And I really had never wake surfed. I just saw the pictures and I saw the dimensions, and yeah, how hard is it to shape a few? So I shaped a few out of polyester foam, polyurethane foam, polyester, I got it backwards, polyester resin and polyurethane foam. And I did them up, brought them to the thing, sold them. And next thing you know, when COVID happened, I had been trying to get that thing off the ground. I had 40 or 50 of these SUPs left in my garage in boxes. And they locked us all down, and I kept glassing for Mitch. I was glassing, only car on the freeway driving down to Imperial Beach getting shapes, glassing. And then we decided, hey, we're going to move to St. George. The 2020 boat show in Utah, I was up there with about 17, 18 of these boards and my inflatable boards. And I came back through 11-hour drive, stopped in St. George, and I felt the temperature in February, because it can't be too cold. You can't have some place where it's freezing outside. And it was like 55 degrees out. Like, this is doable. And the summers get really hot here. 110, 115 sometimes. 113 is probably the hottest it'll get here. But it's hot and it's dry. And I'm like, well, I started asking about the swamp coolers. And my landlord that I got this shop here, it's about 3,000 square feet. He was installing this brand new Australian swamp cooler. And the byproduct of a swamp cooler is airflow. So in the middle of summer here in St. George, it feels like an oven outside. And you come in the factory, it's 75 degrees.
Okay.
And the byproduct is airflow. It's like the air comes in and it just goes right through my laminating area out the door. And so I start thinking, I designed the whole factory around that airflow. Like the sanding room won't get fumes because it's right below where the air comes in. The shaping room, same thing. Laminating room, the air goes through like a horseshoe. It just goes in and goes out. And so I was like, this is gonna work. And the first year, because it was so hard to get surfboards, I got slammed. Jax ordered 350 boards in 2021. And we were just like working. And then my wake surfing partner, Mona, they do wake surf, we had 4 or 5 different models. I said, look, this is great, but I need a CNC machine. And so they helped me with the investment capital to bring one over from one of Mickey's from Australia. The APS 3000 Dyno D is 12 foot long. And I know I want to be able to make anything I make with it. So up until 2021, I was a hand shaper. I shaped with a quarter cable and John Holly style, a little bit of Skip Fry mixed in there, a little bit of Hank Warner mixed in there. But
Yeah.
that's my shaping pedigree. I know it.
Yeah. So as you're mapping out that move and the build in Utah, what was the plan to get boards to and from the coast? And what do you do for employees? You have to train
Okay.
everybody up in Utah?
Yeah, that's really good. You brought those topics up. One of the reasons why I started considering it and planning on it, because it just penciled out really well. Now, when the years I was down in Point Loma at my little shop at Kurt Street, it's a small shop. When it rained, when the storms came through, I'd sit there, and I was living. Eventually, I moved down from Poway in 2017. I lived in Claremont, and it was 15 minutes from the shop. And but I'd sit there at bed and I hear the storms coming in. I left the fiberglass you know, without a bag on it. It was like my shop was leaking and raining, and there was a lot of other issues like the neighbor guy who rented me the place. He was kind of the manager of the site. He didn't like me. He didn't. He would say my dust was dirtier than his dust. You know, he was a welder, and they would break out and do ships inside their little courtyard. They would just block off everything. Next thing you know, they'd be doing major parts of ship grinding, and he'd say, "Look at this dust. This is." And I go wipe the dust, and I go, "It's black. It's my surfboards don't make black dust." So we had this rivalry going over who could fill the dumpster, and it started weighing on me all the problems that San Diego was outgrowing this industry, that I was no longer competing with wood shops and mechanics and bathtub refinishers and those kind of guys. I was now competing with billion-dollar industries like microbreweries and cannabis dispensaries who cannot be anywhere near residential areas or anything like that. And they're billion-dollar industries. And here's this little guy trying to crack out $100,000 or whatever he thinks he can get to survive in San Diego. Cost of living was rising. And then I couldn't get anybody to work for me. So all the guys that I had in the 90s and early 2000s working for me, back in 2015, they all came back. And I found this guy, Ruben Garcia, the guy that taught Ryan Birch how to make surfboards in Oceanside. He had a rough spell. He came back to my shop. I said, "You're hired." My laminator was this Indonesian girl who learned from Jeff Alexander how to laminate back in the 90s. She's, "Oh, Chris, I go to Indo for 8 weeks in June." I'm like, 8 weeks in June? Oh man. And anyway, my luck was so good. Here's my old laminator from the ukulele days, rides up on a bicycle. And he says, "Hey, I wanted to see you." And hey, I gave him a big hug. And I said, "What are you doing?" He's, "Nothing." I said, can you work?" "Yeah, I'll be here tomorrow." So there was my old laminator back in my shop. Of course, you get him, you get his brother. His brother's a polisher and a glosser and hot coater, just great guys, the Garcia brothers. And I trained them from zero surfboard experience when they were both Frito-Lay truck drivers in the early 90s. And so I had guys that would work for me, but the problem was as soon as you had somebody trained up, Chris Ruddy trains a guy, out come the hounds looking for him. Hey, we got a few hot coats over here. Hey, can you laminate a board over here? And you get these guys, and it's not like you could say, because they're 1099, you can't say you're working here or nowhere else. You know, it wasn't like the 60s. And I started getting bummed out because it's like when you have a guy work for you until 2 and then takes off and goes and works at another shop and doesn't do an 8-hour day, you never make a profit. You break even every week. And then if you want to make a profit, it's on your shoulders. So the worker will go and just say, "Yeah, I'm going to work, and then I'm going to go over to Sharpeye and work, and then I'm going to go over to G&S and do a few polishes." And your average age of these guys is between 70 and 45. And I just saw the writing on the wall. You know, I said, well, before long, it's going to be illegal to hire them as a 1099. And where am I going to get the money out of the surfboard guys? You know, if you're working for Jacks, they're frugal, they're really competitive, and you have to be on your toes, and you have to know how to make not 10 boards a week. You got to make 30 boards a week or 40 boards a week if you're going to make it. And so when you have the guys that don't stay around, they're guys that, oh yeah, Jeff Meyer would come spray a board, and then he'd go to Rusty every day. He'd spray at Sharpeye, and he goes to Rusty. You look at his Instagram. They're never at one place. And I wanted to have the 90s again, where I hired the guys and they were full time, and they get there at 6 in the morning, and then they go home and take their kids home from school. And they didn't moonlight anywhere but my shop. And I had a run of 10 years with no moonlighters. They came in, The only guy that I had that was a moonlighter was moonlighting with me. It was Vic Goddard from San Clemente. He'd come down and, oh, there was this other guy who could sand 40 boards a day. No way, they called him. And he was up at Surf Glass up in San Clemente at doing Stewarts and everything and Mayhems. But those guys, once they got busted doing moonlighting for you, they couldn't come. They eventually, after 2 years, they said, I can't come back. They want me to work there.
Yeah.
You know, you want another 10 boards? They're right here. That's what the guys would say at Ron House would say to him. And it was before cell phones. I'd be calling up those, hey, can I talk to Vic? oh yeah, here he is. Hey, I'll be down there in a few. But anyway, that was my predicament. No space, no affordable space. Overly regulated. The county office in Kearney Mesa would send 2 different people from the same office building to come and ask for 2 different permits about the same exact thing. One guy would be like, hey, they wanted you to write down every time you poured a quart of resin in a bucket and kicked it off. They wanted you to write that down. Okay, here we go. Quart and a half. Check. And so when they showed up to ask me, where are your records? I say, oh, yeah, my wife just took them home. Can I email them to you? And so the next day I'd spend 2 hours writing up all these little notes. Yeah, hey, initialing them for my workers. And then I'd scan them and send them email.
Yeah.
And it was a waste of time because one airplane taken off at Lindbergh Field would do enough VOCs to last me a lifetime, right?
Totally.
Or the 100,000 cars driving by on the freeway with it's 200 yards away are creating more view. I was like, okay, why are they hassling me? So I realized, hey, you can't win this game. You got to go. You got to go. And so I started going, yeah. The desert. I'm not going to go to like Alex. Hey, maybe Corona. No. To get the long answer to your question, gosh, I go on and on. I bought I knew I had to make the trek across the desert. It's a 6-hour drive here. I knew I needed a van. So when COVID happened, vans were a dime a dozen because they locked up the freeways or the airports. I picked up a beautiful, tall Sprinter, not a Sprinter, but a Transit, Ford Transit van. And it had no miles on it, brand new. And it was used, of course, but I got it really good deal. And I made a plan like, okay, going every 10 days. I thought 10 days, every 10 days or 2 weeks or something. Go down, pick up the materials, come up, glass, resin, blanks in the van, unload it. My neighbor, my landlord has a forklift. He just puts the resin in the shop. And then when the boards are done, I load them in the van and drive them to the coast. It's 5 hours and 50 minutes from Jack's. And so I'm like, I wonder if this will work. And I thought about it. It's got to work. And I started telling US Blanks and Millennium, don't worry about delivering. I'll pick them up. So just here's my order, have it ready. I'll back my van up. And when I go to those blank places, I'm stuffing the blanks in every square inch. I mean, I'll get 70 blanks in there, and then we'll unload them, get the drum out, and then build boards. And then it's crunch time and we're polishing. Then all of a sudden, all the boards go into the car. Given that 60% of my boards now are going up north to Salt Lake City. And because
what's up there?
The wake surfing industries, my wake surfing partner distributes all over the country out of Salt Lake. So Mono Wake Surf is very popular in Utah, but they also have accounts all over the East Coast, all the way up to New Hampshire and the Great Lakes.
The business model that you envisioned out there, did it always factor for the wake surf business, or was it originally during COVID when you could do it all through surfing?
No, I realized, at first I just thought about surfing, but at the same time, I wanted to, I wanted to go into wake surfing because I thought it was, like I was telling you earlier, it's a group of kids that don't know who the parents are.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I don't know if you've seen, like, sometimes you get Zeke Lau or somebody, and they're busting down that hip hop music, you know, boom, boom. And I'm like, oh, that's cool. And then you'll see the wake surf kids on their videos. It's great because, you know, you hang off the back of the boat with your camera rolling, and you get to see all the action 15 feet away, 10 feet away, right? And they'll put the music to their wake surfing videos. It's all like this weird TikTok music, right?
Mm.
And it's like, you know, it's like stuff you'd probably hear at, you know, what are those things?
Like a
Burning
rave.
Man, or yeah,
Yeah, like a
rave
rave.
music or whatever. I don't want to bust on the brave music kids, but I'm thinking to myself, wait a minute. Surfers always have had their own kind of music, right? Their kind of culture. At least the whole world's wearing Vans sneakers, that surfer look, Billabong, you know. And I know the power of the surf culture is mesmerizing. You don't have to be a surfer to wear Quicksilver or all this stuff, but they have a lot of people that love it. And so I started realizing that no one's in the surf in the surfing wake surfing world. It's 1959 and Gidget just came out. No one's really figured it, that that's surfing. All those kids think that they're doing their parents' sport, which is water skiing, and they don't know quite yet that it's going to severely cross over in a few years. You've got the character, you know, you got guys like Austin Keane, and he's just the beginning. He's the crossover. Kai Lenny's the crossover guy. They put Italo on a wake surf wave. And he was just riding one of his normal surfboards, and he's doing air reverses and he's popping that thing. And I'm like, okay, he's got it. But when I really started to understand is when I started surfing behind it. And I got out and I got on the boat and I had that after surfing like buzz. I'm like, wait a minute. So my goal here in 2024 is just to kind of like start bringing some of these characters here, like the local kids in town. If you saw them, you'd think they were from Oceanside. The way they dress, go down to the local St. George skate park and watch the kids skate and look at their style. They're like wearing the same clothes as the kids in Encinitas or Oceanside, skater kids, surfers. And then I see the way they operate. You know, they've got a say find a 23-year-old kid in California that owns his own $150,000 boat and has a beautiful truck to pull it and does tours. You know, he books people to go out on the boat that don't want to buy one. It's like, and then he's the best surfer that I've ever seen surfing behind a boat. And that guy, you know, is Tanner Staley. He's like, go look at my Instagram. Watch this kid do an aerial 360 and his feet come off the board and he reconnects. He never flails his hands. His hair's perfect, you know. Then you go see the other guys and they're doing the DJ thing, right? They'll make a trick, but they're spinning the DJs, right? That's what they
Yeah.
call it. If your hands are flailing in wake surfing, they say you're a DJ.
Yeah.
And so I think that surfing is going to basically grab hold of wake surfing and say, you're ours.
Yeah.
You know, they make fun of kiteboarders because kiteboarding is like that windsurfing thing, right?
Yeah.
A little crazy, but Kai Lenny is an amazing kiteboarder. But you notice he doesn't bring that up when he's in surf. When he's on the surf camera, he's not going to say, hey, yeah, I went out kiteboarding yesterday.
Right.
So the same thing, and I always tell people, when I say something about wake surfing, they say, oh, wakeboarding? And I'll cut them off and I'll say, wakeboarding's dead. What are you talking about, wakeboard? Yeah, nobody's wakeboarding anymore. All the boats are being made for surf waves. They're making better and better waves, and try to get them to understand that, you know, the numbers are behind this sport. There's over, I think there's like 30,000 wake boats registered in Utah or more, probably 40 or 50 by now, but this is an old
Crazy.
statistic. Now you take the guy that has a boat and he registers it. How many people are going to surf behind that boat? It's a wake boat. It's not a fishing boat or a bass boat. It's not a pontoon boat. This is a boat that's specifically made for wake surfing. And you just do the math. Say 10 people are going to surf behind that boat. 30 times 10, that's 300,000 surfers.
Yeah.
300,000 surfers in one state.
Yep.
Go down the freeway in California and try to see if you see a surf rack anymore on top of a car. You'll see 1 out of 100 maybe with a surfer in it. So I think that the economy in San Diego is hard on surfers because who wants to drop $4,000 a month to live in a house or a condo or something? It's hard. So I'm just trying to figure out, 20 years ago, I couldn't have imagined living somewhere where you can't surf in the ocean every day. But in the summertime, I get a call every day to go hit the waves on the lake. And it sounds so funny. Oh yeah, let's go surf the lake. But when you get out of the water after surfing a 2 to 3 foot wave behind a boat, you feel great. And you do get your legs get surfed out. You don't have to paddle as much, but the next thing that happened and it completely broke my brain. I did not see this coming. Wake surfing was on my radar when I came up here to break into it. And I have a partner that wanted to break into it. He's successful in his own business. My partner with Mona, he's in the golf world. He's a turf guy. He makes lots and lots of business doing turf and creating backyard putting greens and things like that. And so he wanted to break into it because he can into surf. And so we started a great partnership, sort of a Paul McCartney and John Lennon. We come together and we make great boards. He says, this is what I want to do. And I make it, and then we try it and it works. So the next thing came along was the unit wave in Hurricane. Last summer in June, I got a call, and I know this thing was being built for a while, but all of a sudden I get a call from the developer who's making this private community based on a surfing theme. So it's not come retire to St. George and play golf till you die. It's not that. It's a billboard on the freeway going up to Salt Lake and back. You see this giant billboard that says, come buy a lot in the Utah's only surf community. And you see this guy doing a cutback. You're like, what? Doesn't register. Surf community. So 10 minutes from my factory, right where I am now, there's a man-made wave machine called the Unit Wave, and Tony Finn from Liquid Force is now the guy marketing that. I think there's one going up in Mesa that's being done, and this is the first operating wave machine from this Unit Wave company in America. And there it was, June 7th, they called me and said, come ride it. And I'm like, oh, whatever. What do I bring, And so you bring a surfboard, and I jump on this thing, and it was like, broke my brain. I was like, I'm surfing back and forth, doing cutbacks. The water, and then all of a sudden it's dark and there's lights on, and they're playing music over these speakers. And I was like, huh? The Wananeva Beach, right? You've seen Zeke and those guys surfing this thing over in Hawaii.
Yep.
That one's 100 feet wide.
Okay.
This one that we have here is similar wave, but it's not that swimming pool water. This is like 30-foot deep fresh water coming out of a spring, out of a well. And it's beautiful, and all of a sudden it's 53 feet wide. You got a turn, another turn, and then a cutback, and then a turn, and then a cutback. And then once the 20-year-olds got on there, and they started doing air reverses and 360s, and I'm like, game on, then I started thinking, oh, I'm going to jump off the side and land on my board like the guys are doing. I did it. All of a sudden I was like, hey, I feel good,
Wow.
but
Can you explain the technology?
yeah. So unlike a flow rider, which just basically has like fire hoses flinging themselves water up a formed, bank, the unit wave is based off of a wave that happens naturally in Munich, I guess, in Germany. And it's water coming down a thing and it hits this formation and it pops up a wave. And the wave gets so steep that it breaks. So what they've done is they'll get a, a 30-foot pond, the man-made 30-foot pond. You got to have a lot of depth because there's going to be a lot of water moving. And unlike a Kelly Slater Surf Ranch wave, which rumors have it that $600 every time the train goes up and down the track, right? This thing runs for $70 an hour on hydro, right? That's why Utah has very inexpensive power because it's hydroelectric. You're not relying on the sun, you're not relying on propellers, and the wind. It's gravity fed electricity, and there's tons of water here. Like there's a gazillion gallon aquifer under this area that we're in the desert. And so they got water, they got power, and they got land. And they've been working on it. The gentlemen that are working on it are buddies of mine, and I didn't know them until this summer, and they invited me over to surf it. And I looked at what they were riding. They had, gone on the internet and bought Firewires. And they were good boards, but I could tell that there was something off because the volume of the boards was too thick. You don't need to catch this wave. So you don't need, I'd say, a half inch of thickness that you would normally have in a board. You don't need it. And you can use the same curve of the outline. So I went and grabbed one of my twin fin channel bottom stilettos, which I've been making and having good success with surf ride and stuff. I shrunk it down to about 5'8", 5'6", 5'4", even 5'1", and those designs are amazing with the V bottom instead of the concave. If you have a deep concave, you can surf it. It just feels so much better to have V with a double concave.
Yeah.
And so once we got the boards on there that I was making, the people were like, it's a good board. It's better. And that's when all the people started buying the lots. They have 35 lakefront houses there. And I first saw the property, I saw curbs and gutters and the wave machines. The first thing they completed was the wave machine. Water comes up, this big 53-foot ramp. These turbines shoot water up from the bottom of the pond. And imagine 3 feet of water all of a sudden being on top of this big ramp. And, 50, 60 feet downhill, all this water starts, gravity just starts pulling it down. And there's like a little quarter pipe at the bottom that's only about a foot and a half high. But when it hits that, the water surges up to a 4-foot wave. And right behind the wave, it breaks like a whitewash.
Right.
And so you need to wear a leash because if you fall off and you go off in the current, your board will just sit there and tumble behind this wave. And then they have 3 different settings. They have like the beginner setting, middle of the road setting, and then they have this one that's scary where the wave just gets big. And when I did that, it was like 100 degrees outside, and the water was like 75 or 80. It was warm, and you're doing this, and the machine will, like the current will pin you to the bottom. If you jump off and go down, it'll hold you down on the bottom, and they tell you, yeah, just push off towards the, down river, push off that way, and you'll get out of it. And so, I got thumped a couple times and pinned down, but I was just like, I was excited because like being at Sandy Beach and getting slammed, or it's being like blacks getting pinned to the sandbar on an 8-foot
Right.
day.
Yeah.
There's that little bit of danger in there, and you're just like, when you get off the wave, you have to paddle over to the side, and then the current takes you back to the dock, just like surfing the pier. You get inside, you paddle right next to the jetty or the pier, and all of a sudden the current's taking you back outside.
Yeah.
So it had a lot of similarity, and all of a sudden you're paddling again. It's not like wake surfing where the boat comes around and pulls you again. You have to paddle to get back over. So all the kids are there surfing, boys, girls, they're all having fun surfing. And I was like, okay, this is new. This is 2023. This is something I've never seen before and never experienced this before. And I'm 57, and I'm like, okay, I'm open. Where's this going to go? This is the first one? How many is there going to be? There was a time when Utah didn't have any skate parks, and now every town has 4 of them. And every time one goes up, they're just saying, ha ha ha, we have a better skate park than you, to the other towns. And
Right.
there's this competitive spirit out here, and there's a lot of money. People have tons of money. And so when I see that place going in over there, and all of a sudden in June, July, I started having customers come in who were from that world. And the thing that blew me away is they were like, okay, well, we want to get some boards for our kids and for my wife, and I want one. So they start writing up an order, and they're like, okay, how long is it going to take? Oh, 2 weeks. And then out comes a credit card that has no numbers on it. It's one of these super ones, and you're
Yeah.
like, okay, where's the numbers? Trying to do the credit card on my computer, and they're like, oh, let me call my wife. I think she has some numbers somewhere.
Yeah.
But
Well,
but that's
that's the thing too, when you're talking about the boat, the wake surf, people who have a $300,000 boat, they're not going to flinch at the price of the board to ride behind the boat, And so I feel like the surf world, obviously chased themselves to the bottom in terms of pricing, and now they're kind of pigeonholed there. That wake surf, you can make those custom boards and probably charge 1,500, 1,800 bucks for them, and nobody will bat an eye at it, I would think.
we have competitors like Soulcraft out of Oceanside that are just doing wonderful things for us. They'll make a carbon fiber board and charge 1,500, no grip, no fins.
Yeah,
And so when we offer one of our carbon fiber boards with fins and grip for 1,250 or 1,300, people are like, that's a deal, you
totally.
know. And it's not hard to get your baseline model sold for 950, and it's 4 foot. It's a 4 foot long, 4'2" skimboard, and you're like, okay, well, you hit the nail on the head when you said, if you're buying a $300,000 boat, usually the dealer that sells you the boat's going to give you 3 or 4 boards with your purchase. If you're buying a $150,000 boat, he's going to give you 1 or 2 boards.
Yeah,
And then if you're moving into Southern Shores and you just paid, $2 million for your lot, guess what? You're not shopping for your next board, you're shopping for your next airplane.
exactly. Yeah.
And that's not the kind of customer who is not pre-qualified to buy a few surfboards.
Yeah.
And I'm finding that those customers are also going to Nicaragua for 2 weeks, and they're having guys coach them on how to surf better, and they're not using their wake surfboards in Costa Rica or Nicaragua or even Hawaii. They're buying real surfboards, and they want people who don't look at them and judge them as a kook just because all they've surfed up until this point are Kelly Slater boards and soft tops from Costco. You come into my shop, and all of a sudden I had to turn my office into a showroom
Yeah.
and stock surfboards and board bags, and you should see it. It's like, I can see that the future here is going to be surf. This
Yeah.
this is just the first community, and it's private, right? You can't just go and pay $100 and go surf at Southern Shores. You have to basically have your friend that owns a lot, or somebody has to bring you over there. And where it is right now, you call the developer, he's going to let you surf the machine. And you call me and you say, Chris, can I get on? I'm going to say yes. And all it's going to take is So if Philippe Toledo calls me and says, "Hey, Chris, I want to come and surf the machine. Tell me when." And because nobody wants more publicity than those guys. And as soon
Yeah.
as they're done with that community, they already have I don't want to let the cat out of the bag, but there's other plans to build more of a not tourist, but a destination spot. But you imagine, if you had a destination spot comparable to Waco or something like that, but it was, let's say you have a competitive spirit and you want to make Waco ×3 in size, in power. You want to make a Palm Springs wave, but you want to make the wave twice as long. Those are my guys here. You don't want to have 2 river waves. You want to have 3 or, more than one. And they told me the inside track is that they're going to be able to service 150 surfers an hour
Wow.
at a price you can afford. And guess what my goal is? My goal is to be there with a surf shop.
Totally. Supply
Like,
boards.
well,
Let
not
me
only
ask.
that, where do you get an opportunity to be the first? Where do you get an opportunity anymore to rival like Jack's, to be the first, to be the biggest?
Yeah.
So if you call into Utah right now and you Google, find me a surf shop, Siri, find me a surf shop, Google, find me, Alexa, find me a surf shop. I finally came out and said, I'm going to take my Google identity out of San Diego and I'm going to put it here. I was
Yeah.
afraid at first to say I'm a surf shop because, what do you think? What's the first thing you think when you think of a surfboard factory or a surf shop in southern Utah? You think, kook, but it's changing. It's changing
For
very
sure.
quickly.
So I was asking you earlier about manufacturing or who's building your boards in your factory. Have you hired anybody else to learn?
Yeah. I've trained. Right now I have a 27-year-old guy named Kenny. He needs a laminator. I trained him how to, first thing he had here at the factory was sanding and hot coating. And then last year, my laminator, who had been working for me for 2 years, he went on to do something else and he quit, but we quit on good terms. And I said, Kenny, you're going to laminate. So Kenny became my laminator, and my son, who's 20, learned how to sand. So my son's name is Adam. We call him Adam Sandler because he's the sander. He is his thing started with trash cans and changing floors and sweeping and cleaning the office and cleaning the bathroom, all that stuff. My son went through it all since he was 14 or 15. And now he went into polishing, and he's an amazing polisher. Because I think you look at why boards are, why do longboards go in the surf ride at matte finish? Because they can't find anybody to polish them. Otherwise, I got polished. I still do gloss and polish. So I think I got my son. He's been trained to do fin installation. He routes FCS Futures, FCS2, Captain Fin. So we have the old officials that are now called Stavron. We install those. The Bain center box, the Stavron center box. We do them all. And my son and my wife runs the CNC machine. Here's a, we've been married for 30 years, and she comes in here and it's wonderful. It's wonderful to work with her. And my son, who's not working in the business, but he's a consultant that we hire. He's getting his MBA at UVU. And he's also a BYU graduate with his undergrad stuff, but he's running a company, a software education company up in Provo, full-time COO of the company, but he moonlights for me as a consultant. I mean, when I want to do things like our production program that we have on our phone is an app. So I never have to have order cards and, hey, where'd the order card go for this board? Because they fall off, and
Yeah.
the only one you are looking for is the one you can't find. So now we're completely paperless on our production. So you can give me a board and say, hey, is this board ready? And I can go on my little phone app. Anybody in the shop can pull it up on their app and find out what color it's supposed to be, whether it's sanded finish, what's the glass schedule. And then my son set that all up for me. So I have the average person that's not me and my wife are 26 or 27 years old. They work full time. They work from 8 in the morning and they'll leave here at 5. They'll eat their lunch here or go to their house, which is 5 minutes away. They own properties. They own brand new cars. They pay mortgages. They're married guys. Maybe they haven't had kids yet, but I think it'll happen sooner or later. And that's the kind of person I'm getting. They're not drinking and getting wasted and and I'm not sharing them with the whole surf community. Hey,
Yeah.
I train them and I keep them. And then I encourage them to make their own brands. I encourage them to branch out and experience what I did. Go. You want to make a brand? Here, I'm not going to charge you anything to use my shop. You know,
In terms of environmental regulation, is Utah any different than Southern California?
it's night and day. I talked to I have a lot of friends who've been in the industry. Like I just brought Mike Hinson out to the boat show. We've got the license to do Hobie wake surfing boards. So I said, it would be cool if we got Mike Hinson and we made an endless summer model because Mike Hinson was part of the Hobie thing. Through interviewing people like him and having conversations with guys like Bob Bolin, I asked him, what was it like to sand when you set up a factory and you're doing 100 boards a week in the 60s? What was it like to, where'd you sand? And they said, oh, we just had like a little hut out in the parking area, out in the lot, and they sanded. And I learned from Joe, back in the PV Drive days when we were sanding our boards right there, he just kind of tipped the doors shut. And then right after he got done sanding, he'd sweep up and hose everything down. And I thought, oh, isn't that poison? He said, it's inert. Inert means it's like sand or dirt or plastic powder that there's no radiation coming off of it. Like silica, it's just refined something.
Yeah.
But they don't, when I came here, they don't have the health department in St. George is concerned about restaurants and people, getting poisoned at restaurants or whatever. They don't send anybody here. The only thing I got, without even getting a business license, I was getting a visit because my building was brand new. I got a visit from the fire department.
Right.
And they came in just like the fire department did in Oceanside in '95 when I built the factory there. They came in and they just wanted to know where the stuff was. They weren't there to get a permit. They weren't there to tell you couldn't have this or you couldn't have that. They wanted to know when the place went up, where's the stuff,
Yeah.
so that their guys don't get hurt. And so I was like, rolling along, and I had eventually the city called me up and said, hey, you need a business license. I said, okay. Been here for 2 years. What? Sure, I'll get a business license. What do you got to do? Go online. Okay. So you go online, and it was like 1993 in San Diego. Just go down to City Hall and buy a business license. And I was terrified because of all the years that I worked with Joe. I was afraid that some person was going to come by. No, in San Diego, 93, I was afraid to get a business license, because then all of a sudden a bunch of bureaucrats got the phone call, go see what's going on. And here you got your business license, you pay for it, and the dumpster's $50 a month, and it's the biggest thing I've ever seen. I can't even put a dent in it. I throw a bag of foam dust in there, and so I look at it and it's just like paradise. I'm in 1959 and Gidget just came out, and I'm like Bob Bolin, the Greek, sir. I'm not, believe me, nothing leaves the factory. I can gloss boards while my sander is running, because I have like Alex said in his interview with you, he talked about the turret. I got a turret for $300 from Chuck Burns.
Amazing.
And it's not the giant one that's, that Marcio has at Sharp Eye, but it's a smaller version. and we clean the filter out every couple days, and it's wonderful for my size right now.
Yeah.
In the future, I'll probably get the big turret, but for now, I'm good with the small turret.
Well, congratulations. I mean, talk about taking a leap of faith. Once you've kind of, now that you've done it and all of these opportunities are popping up around you, being able to take advantage of them because of your proximity is such a unique situation. So, congrats on making the
Thanks.
move.
Thanks. It feels good to, I had a really rough decade from when the real estate thing happened in '08. I did lose everything. I mean, didn't lose my family, so I can't say I lost everything, but I lost all of my holdings. All my real estate was gone, gonzo. So it feels good to like finally feel that same momentum that I was feeling in the early '90s when I started my ukulele thing. And all of a sudden it was just like surf shops started saying yes to me, and I was doing business, with real supportive surf shops that needed me just as much as I needed them. Um, Now, in business, if you're in business, you do want an advantage over your competitors. And so a lot of times when I say I'm making boards in Utah, people will ask, how how do you do that? They'll ask it like that. And it's like, it's funny. It's like, so the first thing I'll do is I'll look at their shoes and I'll say, well, were those made in Solana Beach? Where was your watch made? You know, and most things that people have now, except for their cars maybe, are made 7,000 miles away. And I look at, this is 600, well, we're 400 miles from the beach. So it's not a big deal to take a product and make it and then drive it 400 miles. That's not a big distance. So I'm looking to try to pick up and grow my surf industry, my standing in surfboards. I'm trying to grow it in California. I've got I got riders over in Hawaii that I support with boards, kids that are surfing competitively. And how do you do that if you're trying to scrape by? How do you go forward in an industry that looks like the choices that I got to take my hat off to people who are going big, Dan Mann, manufacturing the way he does, the size and scope of that's a Chris Ruddy style, right? But I'm a little bit stubborn. I don't necessarily want to try overseas. If a big, if Surf Tech came to me and said, Chris, we want to make a couple boards for a few years, I wouldn't turn down an opportunity to do that. But at the same time, I'm not going to wait for that to happen to promote my brand.
Yeah.
Because
The difference is too, you're still making your boards.
when I started in the early '90s, I looked at Marcio and he had 2 years of momentum when I got back from my church mission. And he was all shortboards, right? Shortboards. He was getting guys like, oh, remember when he got a cover shot with a couple of these early '90s guys like Dave Kennedy, I think his name was.
I remember him.
The guys, he would get Xanadu guys to come over and surf a sharp eye. And then one day that you're on the cover of Surfer magazine, and Marcio is stuck to his guns. He will not make an egg. He will not make it's hard enough to get him to make a fish. Shortboard, performance shortboard, 100 different styles of the 6.0, And I looked at it, I'm like, yeah, I don't want it that bad. I made shortboards too, and that's what we were making. We were surfing, but I also had this longboard thing going with John, Holly, and Skip, and I wanted to be like Joe and surf longboards too. And so I looked at guys in the early '90s. I looked at Becker, Stewart, Eaton, and all these other guys that focused on the longboards and the mid lengths. And I'm like, nobody's coming into that realm. You wanted to be a shortboard shaper in the mid '90s. You got Pesci, you got Surf Prescriptions, you got Sharp Eye, you got Xanadu. There was just a gazillion guys, and it was so competitive. I'm like, I've always wanted to have like a little advantage. So that was why I went into to doing. I mean, people don't know that I made 500 boards a year for dive and surf. The dive and surf boards, the Malibu, that was all me. I was friends with Ronnie Maestrel, and he's like, Chris, we want to make some boards this year. I want to really blow them out. What's the best price you can give us? I said, the best price, here it is, and it's got to be COD. And I used to have that talk. The COD will help me
Yeah.
not go under. You give me COD because they start you at net 30 or net 45. Because net 30 was basically net 35. And I have that meeting and I said, look, you can have this very competitive price, but you got to give me COD. And so I got to know all the accountants and all the accounts payable people. And I learned how to run a fax machine. And it was just like boom, boom, boom. And when you going out in the 90s and the early 2000s and you're getting those weekly deliveries done and your production is just humming, and you know, in those days with my Porter cable, I'd rough 8 boards a day, and I didn't finish them. I had these guys scrubbing the things, and some of the best shapers would come in every afternoon and they'd finish 8 boards a day for me.
Yeah.
Sign my name and everything, and I can tell who was the finish shaper by the way they signed my name. But I roughed every single one of them, and that's where all the shapes from the ukulele that made it through to Chris Ruddy surfboards. They're all basically proven. Thousands of them went out,
Yeah.
and the surf shops were supportive, and that was our deal. COD.
Yeah. Kind of a final closing question. I'm just curious, if you could order any surfboard today from any other board builder, what would you order?
That's a really good question. If I was going to order a board from any shaper, I would probably get like a Jerry Lopez. I would get a Jerry Lopez because that is a surfboard. Obviously that's the niche. Basically, that's the era. When I first started surfing in 1976, when I got to Hawaii, the kids were all going to ride whatever their uncle gave them or their dad gave them. This was the neighborhood kids, and so everybody was riding oversized miniguns. Nobody was riding a board that was like under 6'2" or something. Some kids were riding 7-foot guns, and that was just what you had. And the kids in the neighborhood, so I love those boards. I even, I made a couple of pipeliners and put bolts on them. And Craig Hollingsworth was like making comments on my Instagram, like, "What's the deal?"
Yeah, totally.
But not as I don't make them for any reason. Just but like this is a tribute. I'm going to make this and have it. I don't want to step on toes.
Yeah.
To do that. But I would I would pay anything for that. I think if I had, I'd also, if I could get, Michael Hinson doesn't shape anymore. He's kind of retired. But if I could get him to make me a board and basically maybe just scrub it for a while.
Just get his hands on it.
Hands on it and sign it,
Yeah.
that would be worth ordering. What else? I'd get a board from Toots over in town in Waikiki.
His stuff looks incredible.
I admire his I completely admire his take.
Yeah, me too.
Because I spent time over there at Queens and I surfed there. And when I was going to high school, we would get on the bus and go down there and stash our skateboards and go rent boards for an hour and surf on those old logs at Queens. And so I see what he's doing with the Birdwell campaign, and I'm just like, that's cool stuff.
I agree. It's timeless, but at the same time, there's like a a new take on things when I see imagery of him.
Yeah. Yeah.
Great call. Well, man, this has been unbelievably educational, and I'm excited for what's to come. I mean, you telling what's going on in your little area is totally new, but I could see that being replicated in a lot of other areas. And it actually makes me feel good about it. It makes me feel excited for what's to come, how surfing's going to expand. I mean, beyond the coast, but beyond wave pools alone, too, into the lakes and all that stuff. Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. The surf boat, if you get a moderately priced surf boat, now there's a company called MB that makes a very good surf boat at not much of it. It throws a lip. It actually forms a lip if you get the boat with the ballast right and somebody knows how to set it up. You get a nice little lip, and um, that's not a $5 million or $20 million wave machine
Right.
expenditure. It's a relatively inexpensive price to pay to surf. And so what I tell I kind of like to tell the kids that are wake surf sponsored from our company. I say, listen, when you go on Instagram and you put a post up and you say, don't even say the word wake, say I'm going surfing. I went surfing. I surfed this place. I surfed that place. Drop the wake because it's redundant. We know you're surfing behind a boat. It's obvious, right? But you don't, if the sport is going to effectively cross over and bring in the surf culture, you gotta just say surf. It's like when skateboarders don't say I'm skateboarding. They say I'm skating. I'm gonna go skating.
Yeah.
That helped a lot of the open dialogue between roller skating or whatever. I guess the only people that have never really been accepted are the roller bladers, right?
True.
Sorry, sorry, roller bladers, but
But
we
I don't think that transition could happen for wake surf without legitimate board builders helping the transition like you're doing.
I'm glad I'm not the first because Rusty is one of the pioneers in the crossover. When I don't know if it was Rusty's idea or Clint's idea, his son, but he did it, and I was like, oh shoot, that's a good idea. And why should he take it? Why should he just take the whole thing? And I can't say that I haven't checked out his boards. I mean, I know I'm breaking out rulers and stuff, but I have checked out the bottoms, and when somebody brings, say, somebody brings Doc Lauscha a board and said, Doc, I love this board. It really doesn't matter who shaped it. It matters if he can read that and understand what the surfer wants. And I think that's where um, no wake surfing established like Phase 5 or Hyperlight. These are brands of companies that make wakeboards, right?
Yeah.
Made big names in wakeboarding. Do they ever say, hey, we got Joe Blow shaping for us? They don't, because they're from the water ski world. You just accept that cellophane wrapped plastic thing has got enough technology into it. When you buy it, you're going to go ride and have a good time.
Yeah.
And they do have a good time on those. But I think that stuff that you and I grew up with, hey, that's the shaper over there. Go over and see if you can sweep his room, and he'll give you a sticker. Get on his good side, and you'll get something good out of it. The relationship, maybe. And so I'm pretty happy about bringing this type of the stuff that I know really well, and bringing it into the people in the inland surfing. Before I finish, I just want to say I was at Brian Bent's house, and he collects books. It's like a library. And you go in there, and he's got this little book, not a big book, but a small one. It was published in 1965, 66, and it's like the complete guide to surfing, or the complete intro to surfing, right? Chapter after chapter. This is what a surfboard's made out of. This is what a surfboard should be sized at. And there's little graphs in there. And there's a chapter in this 1965 book on wake surfing. Okay. And they're saying to you, everything I've learned in the last 3 years about wake surfing is in this book. How fast to drive your boat. How do you get the tail of your boat weighted down? Sandbags on this side if you want the right to form. Sandbags on this side if you want the left to form. And then they start talking to the people who are reading that chapter, and they're saying you could surf anywhere you want. Now that there's wake surfing, you can surf. The whole continent is open to surfing. So in 66 and 65, they had the right idea. They weren't taking everybody going, you're all kooks if you don't live west of the 5.
Right.
They were saying you could surf, the wave's not as big, but you'll need this kind of a board. There's a picture of, there's a photo of Midget Farley sitting there posed on the nose of his board surfing. And I couldn't believe the data that they had that matches exactly now. The only thing they didn't have is a giant boat industry saying, we got the best surf boat.
Yeah.
They had boats, obviously, but that was what I was excited about, the Hobie deal, because Hobie was out. You know, if you read the Hobie Alter coffee table book, the biography, I'd say 60% of the photographs of Hobie Alter, commercial photographs that he made, were not on a natural wave. They were on a boat wave. And if you look, they crop them so that all you see is him and the board. Even the tandem stuff where he's got a girl on over his head is at some place in Florida and some lake down there. And we have that was at our shows. We had a big spread, 10-foot wide photograph of a boat with photographers on it with camera stands and Hobie behind the boat holding a girl up doing tandem.
Yeah.
And that's pretty cool. Like, I'm just like, okay, so that's my proof.
Yeah.
All you wake surfers out there, your real parents are surfers. You're not water ski offspring. You're surfers, because the first people to surf behind boats in the summer, they were surfing behind boats.
And you're not orphans either. Your
And
parents have always been here. We've been looking for you, waiting for you to come back.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
come back and listen to some surf music. Come back and listen to whatever the surfer kids are listening to now.
Yeah, exactly. Awesome. Well, again, super educational. Thank you for taking the time to do this.
I'm stoked to have been able to do it. Thanks a lot, David.
Me too. Yeah, no, you're very welcome. I'm glad you reached out. It's good to connect officially.
Okay.
All right. I'll talk to you soon.
Okay, aloha.
Okay. See ya.